There's a quiet road stretching across a sleepy village. A soft breeze sways the tall grass, and an old man, face lined with stories, pedals slowly on his bicycle. His name is Thomas. He's 84 years old. Every morning before the world wakes, he rides 5 miles down this path, not to go anywhere important, but simply to feel the morning air on his skin, to watch the first light touch the rooftops, to remember what it feels like, to just be. Maybe you felt it too, that quiet ache inside, that sense of carrying so much. Responsibilities, regrets, fears of what tomorrow may bring. We race through our days chasing a peace we never seem to catch, thinking it'll come when we've done enough, fixed enough, become enough. But Thomas knows a secret, a truth whispered by wise ones for centuries. Peace isn't something you earn when life goes your way. Peace is something you find when you let go, when you stop trying to hold the world in your hands, when you breathe and accept that the sunrise doesn't need your permission, that your worth was never meant to be proven, that the only moment you truly have is this one. So today, take a moment with Thomas. Feel the rhythm of his pedals. Hear the birds greeting dawn. Let yourself remember, you don't have to keep gripping so tightly, because the peace you long for isn't waiting in some perfect future. It's here, hiding in the spaces between your thoughts, resting softly in the silence of your heart. All it asks is that you let go. Thomas had lived most of his life believing control was the key to peace. He woke before dawn, counting every coin, every grain of rice, checking the locks twice, 3 times, holding his breath whenever the wind howled at night. He thought if he could just plan enough, prepare enough, he could shield himself and everyone he loved from the storms life brings. He remembered the day his son left for the city. He had tried so hard to convince him to stay, offered him work on the farm, promised a safe, quiet life. But his son's eyes were already on distant horizons, chasing dreams Thomas couldn't see. When the door finally closed behind his boy, the silence felt like a betrayal. For weeks he blamed himself for losing control, for not saying the right words, for not being enough. Yet each morning the sun rose. Whether Thomas worried or not, the river flowed. Whether Thomas planned or not, life continued. Without his permission, one dawn he wandered into the woods. Needing air, needing space, he sat by a small stream, watched leaves drift effortlessly on the water. Some leaves spun in circles, some glided straight, some dipped beneath the surface, then reappeared downstream, moving always forward. He realized something he had missed his entire life. The stream didn't curse the rocks. It didn't demand a different path. It surrendered to each curve, and in doing so found its way with grace. The more he watched, the more he felt. The tightness in his chest began to soften. He saw that his desperate need to control had kept him trapped in fear. He understood that clinging to the illusion of certainty was like trying to catch smoke in his hands. He thought about the Buddha's teaching on impermanence, anicca, how everything, from the mountains to our very breath, is in constant change. He remembered stories of monks who found peace not by mastering the world, but by mastering the art of letting go. Thomas began to wonder, could it be that true strength is not measured by how tightly we hold, but by how gently we release? The next morning, as he fixed his breakfast, he chose not to plan every minute of the day. He left space for surprises. When his neighbor stopped by unannounced, he welcomed him with a smile, instead of annoyance at the disruption. When the rain came earlier than forecast, he watched it fall, listening to each drop drum on the roof, like a quiet lullaby. And in those small moments, he discovered a freedom he had never known. Freedom from the endless struggle to make life fit a perfect mold. He began to understand that control is like trying to hold back the ocean. With your bare hands, the waves will come, The tide will rise. But if you learn to float, to ride the swells with trust, the sea becomes your teacher, not your enemy, because letting go of control doesn't mean giving up on life. It means showing up fully, doing what you can with care and presence, then releasing the rest to the wisdom of life itself. Thomas found that each time he let go, his heart grew lighter, his breath deeper, his sleep more peaceful. He noticed small wonders he used to miss, the way sunlight turned raindrops into tiny rainbows, the laughter of children chasing butterflies, the softness of evening air. He learned that peace doesn't come when everything is in its place. Peace comes when you make your home in the ever-changing dance of life. So, if you've been carrying the heavy burden of trying to control it all, if your mind spins with worry about what could go wrong, take a breath. Remember the stream, remember the ocean, let life move you. And trust that you, too, can find your way when you stop fighting the current. Thomas had always believed that to love something meant to hold it tightly, to grasp it with both hands, to keep it close, so it would never leave. He remembered the day his wife gave him a small jade pendant, worn smooth by her fingers over the years. He kept it tucked in his shirt, a secret talisman he clung to when the nights grew long and the world felt too big. But as the years passed, he found himself checking for it constantly, terrified it might slip from his pocket. The pendant, once a symbol of love, became a chain of fear. What if he lost it? Would her memory vanish with it? Would he ever feel whole again? One afternoon, sitting beneath the old banyan tree, Thomas watched two sparrows. They fluttered around each other in playful loops, landing for a moment, then leaping back into the sky. He realized they never tried to catch one another, to pin each other down. They simply danced, free and full of joy. He thought of the Buddha's words on Tanha, craving, clinging. How attachment is like tying your heart to something that is always changing. No matter how tightly you hold, time will pull it away. Children grow up, friends drift apart, bodies age, dreams evolve. He remembered seasons when the harvest was plentiful, when laughter filled the kitchen, and he remembered winters when loss sat heavy at the table, when he wished he could freeze time, lock every happy moment in a box. But life kept moving. Unconcerned with his wishes, he began to understand that love is not about possessing. Love is the courage to open your hands, to hold gently, and to let go when the time comes. One morning, he took the pendant from his pocket. He held it to his heart, whispered his gratitude, then placed it on his wife's old dresser. He felt a tear slip down his cheek, but it was not just a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release, because he saw that real love is not about owning or keeping. It's about honoring the moments you share, giving freely, and allowing life to flow where it must. From then on, he loved his children. Without trying to control their choices, he cared for his friends. Without expecting them to fill his emptiness, he cherished each sunrise. Without demanding it last forever, he discovered that when you loosen your grip, you make space for love to breathe, for connection to deepen, for peace to enter. Because attachment often wears the mask of love, but in truth it grows from fear. Fear of being alone, fear of change, fear of not being enough. Yet in every moment we dare to let go, we find that love doesn't vanish. It expands, it softens, it frees. So if you find yourself clinging tightly to people, to things, to stories of what should be, take a breath. Remember the sparrows, remember the quiet wisdom of an open hand, and trust that love, when given freely, always finds its way home. Thomas often found himself wandering back through old memories. He would sit in his wooden chair, gazing out at the hills, replaying words he wished he hadn't spoken, moments he wished he could relive, choices he wished he could undo. Each memory weighed on him. Like stones in his pocket, he carried them everywhere. The time he disappointed his father, the argument with his brother that ended in silence, the night he came home too late and missed his daughter's only piano recital. He thought if he held these regrets tightly enough, he might change what had already happened, that by punishing himself over and over, he could somehow make it right. But the past is a closed book. No matter how many times we turn its pages, the words don't change. The ink has dried. One evening, as dusk fell across the village, Thomas saw his reflection in a puddle shimmering beneath the old oak. He noticed how his face looked tired, how his eyes seemed to search for something they could never find in yesterday. He remembered a teaching he once heard. You cannot see your reflection in running water if you keep stirring it. His mind had been stirring the waters of the past for years, never allowing them to settle. He took a breath, and in that stillness, he felt something shift. He realized the past was not his prison. His refusal to let it go was. He forgave himself for his mistakes, understanding they were part of his path, stepping stones that taught him compassion, patience, humility. But Thomas also discovered another shadow lurking within him, his ego. For so long, he had built an image of himself, the hardworking father, the respected elder, the man who always knew best. Whenever someone challenged his opinion, he felt a spark of anger. Whenever someone questioned his worth, he felt the need to prove himself. He noticed how many times arguments weren't about truth, but about his need to be right. How many sleepless nights came from wounded pride, not real problems. Ego, he saw, was a fragile mask. He kept patching, defending, afraid it might crack. He thought of the monks who taught that true freedom comes not from winning every battle, but from realizing there is nothing to defend. That humility is not weakness, but strength born of self-awareness. So Thomas began to practice quieting his ego. When criticized, he listened, instead of bristling. When praised, he smiled, without letting pride swell in his chest. When he made mistakes, he admitted them softly, without excuse. The more he let go of needing to appear perfect, the more peace he found. Conversations became lighter, relationships deeper, and his heart more at ease. He saw that releasing the grip of the past and softening the walls of the ego were two sides of the same key to freedom, because as long as we carry old wounds or cling to a rigid identity, we remain stuck. But when we let go, we step into the present, unburdened, open, alive. So if your past still calls you back with whispers of regret, if your ego demands you always be right, take a breath, let the past rest in peace. Lay down the heavy armor of ego and step forward, light as the evening breeze, free to meet each moment with an open heart. For most of his life, Thomas held tight to a quiet list of expectations. He expected his days to unfold according to his plans. He expected those he loved to know what he needed, without him ever saying a word. He expected gratitude for every sacrifice, recognition for every effort, a life that rewarded his hard work with fairness. But as the years passed, he found disappointment hidden beneath each expectation. Friends sometimes forgot to call. Rain fell on the day of the harvest festival. His children chose paths he couldn't understand, and each unmet expectation cut him deeper than he dared admit. He began to see how the silent contracts he made with the world were never signed by anyone else. He realized expectations were invisible strings he tied around people, moments, even himself, strings that only pulled tighter when reality didn't match his hopes. One morning, sitting on his porch as fog lifted off the hills, he watched a single spiderweb, glistening with dew. A breeze shook it gently, But it held, bending, flexing, moving with the air. Instead of fighting it, he thought, what if I too could be like that web, strong but yielding, rooted but not rigid, able to sway with life? Instead of snapping beneath its winds, he remembered the Buddha's teaching that suffering often comes not from what happens, but from our resistance to what happens. He saw that expectations are like maps drawn over unfamiliar lands, useful for direction, but dangerous when we refuse to see where we truly are. So Thomas began to release his expectations. One by one, when a neighbor forgot his birthday, he chose to smile instead of feel slighted. When clouds covered the sunrise, he marveled at the softness of the mist. When his daughter decided to move far away, he wished her courage, instead of clinging to his wish for her to stay. The more he let go of how things should be, the more he noticed the quiet beauty of how things are. He found joy in simple mornings, in the warmth of tea shared with an old friend, in the sound of rain drumming on the roof. As he drifted to sleep, he discovered that embracing what is doesn't mean giving up on dreams, but loving life as it unfolds, with all its imperfections, surprises, and gifts, because every moment we spend mourning what didn't happen is a moment stolen from the wonder of what is happening. Thomas learned to meet each day with curiosity instead of demands, with gratitude instead of disappointment, and slowly he realized expectations are heavy stones we place in our pockets, but when we lay them down, we can finally walk freely, lightly, open to the world as it comes. So if your heart is tired from carrying all the ways life has let you down, if you find yourself gripping tight to how things ought to be, take a breath, let go of the old map, trust the path beneath your feet, and allow each sunrise, each breeze, each quiet moment to remind you that life's real beauty is found not in perfection, but in presence. Thomas spent many years trying to explain himself. He chose his words carefully, rehearsed his thoughts late into the night, hoping that if he could just say it perfectly, those around him would finally see his heart. When someone misunderstood his intentions, he felt an ache so deep, it kept him awake. Long after the conversation had ended, he wanted to be seen, to be known, to be recognized as good, as wise, as worthy. But the more he tried to correct every misconception, the more tangled his heart became. Every misunderstanding became a storm in his mind. Every silence from others, a sign he had failed. One evening, as he sat beside a small campfire, Thomas watched the flames dance and flicker. He thought about how the fire simply burned, offering its light and warmth, without demanding thanks or worrying who admired it. He realized he too could simply be, without needing to justify every spark of his soul, because the need to be understood is often a quiet prison, a chain that ties our peace to someone else's perception. He remembered the Buddha's teaching that truth doesn't need to shout or convince, it only needs to be lived. He began to see that not everyone would hear his words as he meant them. Some would judge him through the fog of their own fears. Some would twist his kindness to fit their stories, and that was okay. He learned to rest in the quiet knowing of his own heart, to trust that sincerity needs no defense, that living in alignment with his values was more important than being praised or understood. But Thomas also noticed something else that stole his calm, resistance. Every time life brought pain, he thought this shouldn't be happening. Every time plans changed, he felt frustration rise, like a fire in his chest. He resisted grief, believing it would swallow him whole. He resisted change, believing it threatened his safety. He resisted uncomfortable truths, hoping they might vanish if he just looked away. But life, he discovered, is like the wind. It moves with or without our permission, and the more we push against it, the more exhausted we become. One morning, as dawn painted the sky in soft pink, he stood barefoot in the wet grass. Breathing deeply, he whispered, "I accept this moment, exactly as it is." He felt the tension in his shoulders ease, the knot in his chest loosen, a sense of peace, quiet but powerful, settled in his bones. He saw that letting go of resistance didn't mean loving every hardship, but meeting each experience with openness, trusting that every joy and sorrow had something to teach him. He discovered that surrender is not weakness, but an act of courage, a choice to stop fighting reality and start dancing with it, because the heart that no longer needs to be constantly understood, the mind that no longer needs to control every outcome, and the spirit that no longer resists the flow of life, are free. So if you find yourself exhausted from explaining your worth, if your soul feels torn from pushing against what life brings, take a breath, return to the quiet strength inside you. Trust that your truth shines brightest when you live it simply, gently, without resistance, and know that calm doesn't come when others finally see you, or when life finally obeys your wishes. It comes the moment you choose to stop the struggle and simply be. As the first light of dawn spills across the quiet fields, Thomas sits on the same old bench. He's known for decades. The morning air is cool, filled with the songs of sparrows and the scent of dew-kissed earth. He closes his eyes, feeling how light his heart has become, no longer weighed down by the past he cannot change, the expectations that once chained him, the desperate need to be seen. He understands now that letting go is not a loss. It is the beginning of true freedom. It is the soft opening of the heart that allows love to flow without fear of holding or losing. It is the quiet acceptance that life will never follow every plan, yet can still be breathtakingly beautiful. It is the humble wisdom that we don't need to win every argument, nor prove ourselves in every moment, to know our own worth. He breathes deeply, and with each breath, he releases what no longer serves him, making space for peace to enter, for gratitude, for wonder, for a life lived fully, in the only moment that ever truly exists, now. And as the sun rises higher, painting the sky with gold, Thomas smiles. He knows that letting go is not an end, but a gift we can offer ourselves, again and again, each day we wake, because when we let go, we don't fall, we rise. We rise into a world where love is freer, where peace runs deeper, where our hearts can finally rest. So wherever you are right now, whatever burdens you've been carrying, whatever fears or regrets still whisper to you in the dark, take a breath, know that you are enough, and gently, bravely let go. Thank you for sharing these moments with us. If this journey touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, and share it with someone you love. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories of peace and wisdom.